Listener emails on episode 378 of the Actual Astronomy Podcast. I'm Chris, and joining me is Shane. We are amateur astronomers who love looking up at the night sky, and this podcast is for everyone who enjoys going out under the stars. So, Shane, we should give a reminder for our Patreon calendar draw.
So, you as editor of the RASC calendar, Observer's Calendar, which lists all sorts of important, information about observing, particularly like moon phases, but other events are marked in the calendar as well. And we'll give out a few of those to a random Patreon supporter. Supporters, I guess. We'll have multiple calendars to give out. All you need to do to be entered into the draw is be a Patreon supporter for us.
Nice.
I think that's it. Hey,
that's it. That's it. Very simple. That we decided to we always go with that rule, Shane. You made up one rule when we started this, and that's try to keep it simple. And whenever we start doing stuff and it doesn't seem simple, you always step in and say, this could be simpler. And I agree. All right. We also have a Patreon supporter to thank. Thanks to Michael, who's a Patreon supporter. He's a returning Patreon supporter. So we appreciate that, Michael. And Shane, did you get any observing in this week?
A little bit of visual, no attempts really made to go out in the evening. But I forget which morning it was. I was going to work and it was exceptionally clear. And was Venus ever bright? I was quite astonished. And you know what? Pretty much like the first time I see Venus during whatever season, it's favorable in. Sometimes it's morning, sometimes it's night. The first time I see it, it always reminds me how bright it is. And for some reason, I kind of forget that in between times. So,
yeah,
but that's it for me.
I was looking at it as well. It is very bright. In fact, it's like so bright right now. I don't know what the magnitude is. I guess I should know that, but it's so bright that I really couldn't get a sharp focus on my binoculars just because it's just like so dazzling. And yeah, it's very, very bright. Eh?
Yeah. I should look that up too. I'm not sure what phase it's in either, but I'm guessing that a fair amount of the planet is reflecting light right now to be so bright, but who knows? I guess I should check.
Yeah, I had a look. I got up yesterday morning, so we're getting some work done on the slanty shanty out here, and as part of that, I get all kinds of fun phone calls. One of them was from my builder this week saying that he was successful in cutting a giant hole in the side of the cabin. Whoa. So, and that I should come out and take a look. And so I did. But I really hadn't planned to come out nor stay. I was just going to run out and I just threw like a change of clothes in and a handful of food. And I'm glad I did because that was 2 days ago now. And we ended up monkeying around with stuff Friday night and most of the day yesterday. So we're just trying to see what can be done for the place to use it for as long as possible, or if the weather warms up. So we think we've got a few tweaks there that are going to enable me to get a lot more astronomy in coming months and hopefully in coming years.
Well, that's encouraging.
I know, like a cabin is not like in a way like the most exciting astronomical accessory, but let me tell you, it's pretty nice to wake up. I keep it nice and warm in here when I'm going to observe. So I wake up and in sort of the main part of the cabin, it's like 20 degrees. And yesterday morning it was minus 13 outside with the wind chill. And you bundle up and step outside and you're nice and warm and make an observation and come in for 5 or 6 minutes, warm back up and head out and do another one and come in and just roll back to bed. So it's pretty sweet.
Yeah, that's ideal, really, when you don't have to drive or anything. You just walk to the telescope and then walk back to bed.
Yeah. And as you know, like one of my big things is observing in the morning hours. And, that is just just for me anyway, it's exponentially more difficult to kind of go and load the car and drive to an observing site. That was always one of the challenges for me in astronomy anyway, is that it didn't sync up with other things. So by being out here, I'm able to do that and managed to freeze up one of the pipes and froze it up again last night, because here this morning it is minus 21, minus 22, give or take with the wind chill. I think the core temperature is minus 14 or minus 15, but there's a little bit of a breeze. So I was out this morning plugging in a line heater, and anyway. Yesterday
Right on.
morning, though, I get out with the 12 by 36 binoculars. We're into that phase of the moon, Shane, where it's pretty much near full. And
Hmm.
I was working away on my plan to try to observe all the Messiers with my binoculars. I had some success, or I had the success on the targets I went for, but I'm starting to get doubtful I'm going to get them all.
Oh, really? Just some
Well,
of the fringe ones that are maybe slightly beyond the reach of the binos?
I think like some of those Virgo ones are fainter than these.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I was getting down close to, I think I can get to about 10th magnitude, but I think
Okay.
I think there's a few Messiers that are just a hair fainter. I got to go back into M76. That's been one of the toughest ones so far. I think I can get it,
Mhm.
but that one's pretty small. And then I think some of those ones in Virgo are going to be really tough. I'm up to 60. I've done 68 of the 110
Okay.
since the start of September. So, but this weekend, yesterday morning, I got up, I went out. The moon and Jupiter, there was like that moon and Jupiter pairing. It's
Hmm.
in the calendar.
Hmm.
So I put all these things in the calendar. So I knew to get up. But if you didn't, you should become a Patreon supporter, and your chance. Maybe you'll win a calendar, or you should go and just order the 2024 calendar from the resc.ca web store. But I got up and went out and had a look at that moon and Jupiter pairing. It was super cool because it was very low by the time I went out at 5:30. It was only maybe, I don't know, 7 or 8 degrees above my horizon. And then could see the moon, of course, not quite full, just I think a couple days before full. And then I went and was looking at Jupiter right beside it, and could see the moons of Jupiter and our moon. And I could see the disk of Jupiter all sort of in the same field at the same time. It was pretty cool. I had a pretty good time.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. And then what else did I get up to there? I took a look at Orion's belt and like the sword area, and just kind of did a bit of a scan around M41, and then decided once the moon went behind the hill to kind of get back down to my Messier project. Took a look at Messier 66 and Messier 65, part of the Leo trio up there in the constellation of Leo. So not sure if you ever recall looking at those two or not, but they're sort of
Yeah.
prominent in the spring sky.
Yeah, I've looked at those quite a bit, even from my backyard here in the city. And they actually don't look too bad, even under light polluted skies. Certainly better under a dark sky.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I noticed right away is that and this is in the binoculars, of course, is that M66 is much brighter out of all these ones that I looked at. It's by far the brightest one, and it has like a mottling, like you can see some like brighter spots in the core area, which I was sort of surprised to see just in the binoculars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting too.
And then M65 is to the right, or just over to the west a little bit. And it is much fainter. It's for like around magnitude 9.3, I think, or something like that.
Okay.
And then, so just at first I thought it was like a star or a set of stars. And then kind of as the moon really made its way below the horizon, I could see that it was not that it was the galaxy. That was pretty tough.
Mm-hmm.
And then I moved over to M105, M96, and M95, and taking a look there, like M96 is just a hair brighter and easier to see than M65 was. So it's kind of like a nice natural progression to go from 66, 65 to 96, 95, and 105. 96, then I could see it was now like fully dark. And certainly when I went back and looked at 65 again afterwards, it was much easier to see as well. So kind of getting to sort of that 9.5 magnitude isn't so bad, but M95, I think it's like 9.7 or something like that. And it was tough. I did kind of see it, and I found M105 was a little bit easier to see, but you kind of get all three of those in the same field of view at the same time. But that a tougher observation. But, I kept thinking, well, if getting to 9.3 was a little bit of a challenge with some of the moon glow and, other things going on that, might be able to get to 10th magnitude here. But boy, I don't know. I think some of these are going to start to get pretty tough pretty quick.
Yeah, sounds like it. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, like if you're under, a sky without the moon, and maybe even you say grasslands, if that increases the possibility of success.
I think part of the challenge with some of these is that I would probably, and Mike and I were chatting the other day about going down to grasslands the first weekend of May. And I think that these would still be high enough, that Virgo area, to get at that point in time. So that would probably be my shot if I don't get them from here. I think from there, though, because that sky, I think, could be as much as a magnitude fainter than this sky. And this sky here is pretty dark, though, like magnitude 6.2, 6.3, and in the summer when all the leaves are on the trees and stuff, maybe even 6.4, 6.5 in the best nights. But down there, yeah, you can get into the 7th magnitude pretty easily on a great night. So might be my shot there.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, we'll see. So let's see. Hit an email here from Tim. Maybe I'll give a read of this one here, Shane. Sure. And then the next one is from Jim. Did you check out the PDF that Jim sent?
Yes, I did.
Okay. All right, cool. All right, I'll read this one and maybe we'll get you to do the next one. Sure. Email from Tim. Tim writes, hey, Chris and Shane, this is Tim from St. Louis. First off, I want to wish you both happy Thanksgiving, which is American Thanksgiving. We had our Thanksgiving back in early October, and he goes on to say, we will be celebrating here in the States tomorrow, which is November 23rd. And I'm definitely thankful for your amazing podcast. Well, thanks so much, Tim. We appreciate that. He goes on to say, because, sorry, go ahead, Shane.
No, that's fine.
He goes on to say, because of your podcast, I've begun my astro sketching journey, and I just completed my second sketch. Attached below, I chose M27, the dumbbell, for this round, and I think it turned out pretty good. So I put it in the notes there. I think it turned out really well.
Yeah, for sure.
He says, I've definitely been able to make out more detail while sketching and even just observing with a sketching mindset. This was done this past Saturday night with my XT8 Dob, which is an 8-inch Dobsonian, and Apertura 26mm super wide angle SWA eyepiece for magnification of about 46x. I was under Bortle 5 skies with above average seeing transparency and the setting crescent moon, which was at about a 35% illumination. I'm absolutely loving sketching at the moment. Thank you, Chris, for helping me to really get started. Yes, no problem. This is one of the things that we were doing, and we appreciate your feedback, Tim, because it's exposing people to a lot of the different aspects of amateur astronomy, not just talking about astrophysics, which we seldom do.
Yeah. And if there's one thing that does intrigue me, I've said multiple times, I'll probably never really get into sketching. Just it's not my thing. But what does really intrigue me is that, you really do have to sit down and observe an object. And pretty much any sketcher that I've talked to or that we've had on the show, always indicates that it really kind of fine tunes your observing and probably makes you a better observer over time. So that part of it is certainly appealing to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, everybody has their own sort of way of observing, and it's not to try to convince everybody to go and do sketching. That's not what we're doing here. What we're trying to do is just expose everybody to the broad reaches of amateur astronomy, and that there, like, some people may not even be aware that there's, if you're just getting started and you're, sort of getting started on your own, like many of us did, then you might not even be aware of sort of some of these sketching resources, or maybe that there's actually people still doing this, right? It seems kind of a bit antiquated, but lots of people are still doing it. It's lots of fun and not as difficult as you might think. And I really thought his sketch was quite excellent, Shane, of M27. I thought it looked a lot better than the one I did recently. So
yeah, it was beautiful. Very, very nice rendition of that nebula.
Yeah, his handwriting is much much better than my handwriting. That's for sure. Tim goes on to say, I also want to share with you guys that it seems there might be a young astronomer emerging in my family. My niece has taken an interest in the movement and phases of the moon. And grandma texted me the other day with a super urgent question from my niece asking what the really bright star was in the east these days. And apparently she was beyond excited to learn that that was Jupiter. So that's pretty cool.
Hmm.
She also discovered Venus in the morning sky with my help. And after talking to her mom a little, we decided I'm going to get her a little pair of binoculars for Christmas. She is so excited about all the cool stuff in the sky. Here's a link to the ones I'm looking at. And he picked out a pair of small, fairly lightweight 7x35 Celestron up close binoculars for her. I think that's a pretty good choice.
Yeah, I think that's really good for a first pair of binos that will last a long time.
Yeah. And he goes on to say, I loved your recent podcast with Cindy and appreciate the inclusion of some of our previous email exchanges. It made my day when that episode was released. So yeah, we're always happy to include people's emails into us. It's impossible to include them all, but we do kind of pick out a few that we think will work with the shows. I'm trying to find also the David Dunlap Observatory Tour sounded really cool. So I'm trying to find large observatories in my area. Keep up the good work. And as always, clear skies. Thanks, Tim. Very cool.
Yeah. Should I move on to Jim's email?
Go for it.
Sure. So Jim sent an email and, as you mentioned earlier, a PDF. And I'll read the email here first. So Jim says, it is Thanksgiving in the United States. And as I listened to the podcast this morning comparing mounts, I was struck by the passion both of you bring to your sessions and realized that it is one of the reasons I listen every Monday and Thursday mornings. Sharing your insights on gear, observational experience, and solutions, as well as the many guests you've featured, have been useful, entertaining, and appreciated. My wife has continued her tradition of printing a photo book each year featuring some of my favorite images. And I was struck by how many of the sketches Chris mentioned are targets that I've focused on, pun intended. So Thor's helmet, the Veil, Helix, Rosette, Cocoon, and Cone Nebulas are all ones I've included in the book. The PDF is attached, though the size may create transmission issues. In any case, thanks again for sharing your passion, Jim. And Chris, that book was pretty incredible. It's so well done. I think it's phenomenal.
Yeah, and I really like this. I think Jim has sent us in fact, I know he sent us like the previous versions of this. I remember the first time I got it, I'm like, what is this attachment? Like, because usually people send like a photo or something, it's this PDF. And then I was like, oh, it's like a real thing. And so what he does is he has an image, and then beside the image, he has a description. And things are kind of like, it's well laid out. Like they've used like a design tool, and it's really cool. The only thing with I feel like this would be like such a cool handout to have, like if you were doing like public outreach somewhere. It's just like such a cool thing. I've never seen something like that done before, where you have like all these different objects sort of from throughout the year, and then paired with information about the object and that kind of stuff. It looks very beautiful, and there's like a beautiful background, and they've kind of spent a lot of time and attention putting these together. It's pretty cool. But yeah, it makes me like, I meant to ask like what he's doing with it exactly. It seems like it should be shared to a broader audience somehow, but it's pretty cool anyway.
Yeah, it almost seems sort of like in the spirit of scrapbooking, where you capture, memories or kind of momentous events. And I wonder if it's sort of a year in review of, what he was into for astronomy. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what it is. Yeah, but I hadn't thought about sort of that scrapbook connection. I like that idea, like the astronomical scrapbook of 2023. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it'd be neat to have a bookshelf of, each year of, maybe observing lists or key objects that either you observed or imaged or sketched throughout the year. I think it would be neat to just pull those off the shelf occasionally and kind of walk down memory lane about what you were doing in 2023 for astronomy.
Yeah, I'm almost like at that point where like in my observing sketchbook, the one that I have now, I've, if I'd started this back in January of last year, I'd almost be at like the perfect cadence. I think it's 80 or 90 pages. And then I use both sides of the pages. But I'm at almost the point where if I had thought it through and done it and been a little bit more diligent, I would have like sort of perfectly filled that with 180 sketches or something like that. Would have been awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I've done like myself for sketching this fall. I think I'm getting close, like 80. So yeah, maybe a little more because I did 68 Messiers plus a few other Messiers, and then through Microscope, same Messiers, and then more Messiers, and then a bunch of weird stuff like Thor's helmet. Cool. All right. Going on, we had an email here from Peter, and Peter was writing about the mounts. I kind of got the feeling maybe we misspoke, Shane. So I'll just read this, and then, yeah, I think he gives some good practical advice. So maybe I'll get the context. So Peter is a listener, and Peter has a permanent pier in his backyard for his mount and telescope. So you can just go up and put it on. I think he moved recently, and then he's transitioned that over to the new location, and it's really like a very nice and ideal setup, not an observatory, but like a really nice, beautiful permanent spot in his yard using one of the Next Dome piers, and then some custom pier adapters. So Peter says, I've struggled with understanding the question of leveling the tripod or mount pillar for an EQ mount with respect to tracking and guiding. I've come to the conclusion it will not make a difference if you have an accurate polar alignment. Of course, leveling the tripod and having a balanced rig are both sensible things and essential for safety. If an EQ mount is accurately polar aligned, then the RA axis is pointed at the pole and should stay that way irrespective of how the top of the tripod is oriented with respect to the ground. If the rig is stable, the only motions of the mount are the rotations about the RA and deck axes. So tracking and guiding cannot depend upon the alignment of the tripod. Chris, you mentioned possible changes in leveling of your mount pillar in your observatory as the footing settles into the ground. I wonder if you had an arrangement like the one, and he includes like a photo where he has like, I think like 6 or 8, they look like, going to say like 1/2-inch bolts coming up to a plate that you can change the leveling on. The top plate is leveled by adjusting the bolts. The ones that come with the pillar are much shorter than what I have installed here, but this improves the axis, and the mounting is still very rigid. Clear skies. Peter. Thanks for that, Peter. So, yes. So regarding the EQ mount, Shane, I feel like you're the EQ mount expert because you actually own one and I do not.
Expert,
what are your thoughts there?
Use expert loosely there. Well,
you're expert. You're the expert between us.
Okay, that's right.
Like my wife and I always say, whoever cooks dinner you're the best cook in the house, right? Kind of thing, right? Because that's all that matters, right? Nobody else is here cooking dinner. Nobody else is here doing a podcast. So you go.
Yeah. So irrespective. So I think he's saying that
it doesn't matter if it's level or not.
Level, yeah. Like other than you don't want it to collapse, which of course, yeah. I think that makes sense. Like I think he's probably right. I don't know. I'm not experienced, or I haven't really used my EQ mount all that much, and certainly even less have I used it in a tracking fashion, like actually using the motors to track. So, but yeah, I guess it makes sense. If you're aligned to the pole and you got that axis correct, everything else should be kind of aligned. Now, I wonder though, if that polar alignment sort of in a way accomplishes like a leveling of the tripod, because I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud here.
Yeah, I gotcha. I think there's two things he mentioned. If it's the safety concern, and I think there would be a safety concern if it was really far out. But my thinking would be that if the mount isn't level, just because of even though you have like your counterweight and your telescope, and you make sure that they're sort of perfectly balanced. See, when that force is actually coming down on the top of your whatever it is, tripod or pier, just the way that the gears are going to sit, I think depending on the mount, right? Like if you sort of had like, if you had your telescope very undermounted, or sorry, if you had your telescope very overmounted, like I've seen people put like some of those Paramount mounts and they'll put like a 60 millimeter telescope on, then I'm like, yeah, sort of that would be fine. But if you're putting like I don't know, like a 10-inch reflector on a, you know, Vixen Super Polaris or something like that, it might like mesh the gears off. Like it might not, like it might tend to drift or something like that. So you'd have to, I think sort of theoretically it's correct. I'm just not, I wonder about the practicality, probably on a individual basis. Like it could vary. Then he talks about the orientation, and yeah, the orientation for sure, as long as it's polar aligned and blah, 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 that should work. He asked me though, Shane, about the leveling of my mount pillars. So I have a pier, and this is of our own design. And by that, it's mostly of the design by my builder. Or actually, hopefully he doesn't drop by while we're doing the podcast, but he is supposed to drop by later, although it is exceptionally cold this morning. So who knows if I'm hoping we can do this, but regardless, we're going to try putting the mount up in there. We've got a post in the ground. It's a giant wooden post that's 6x6. It's in the ground 4 feet and comes up about 40 inches into the observatory. And then we've sandwiched it together with some other boards. And what I had made for this is a plate, kind of like Peter's plates, although this one might be a little bit rougher. And that plate is sitting directly on the pier top. And then we have the pier extension, which sits above that. And he asked, like, if I have a way to change and modify that with like a set of screws. And my builder, he's not an astronomer, but when he's one of those people that can really see things working out in his head. I can just explain something and he can understand it in a different way. And it's really cool because he's not polluted with all of the astronomy stuff, although he'll spend time Googling stuff and look, like he's actually learned a fair bit about telescopes and astronomy, even though he's never even looked through a telescope yet, strangely enough. But what he designed, Shane, is that on our plate that's sitting right on top of the mount, we've got 4 screw holes in the corner. And we also have a series of bolts that go around. And what we can do is we can back off some of the bolts and we can shim it very easily. Okay.
Okay.
And so that's how we would level it. Now, here's the thing is that the way that he operates is he's a bit of a perfectionist, which is really great when you're building an observatory because it's built to this you've seen it. It's very well built. Mm-hmm. And so even though we were concerned, that hill does have a significant amount of motion on it. Like it's actually like a red label in Saskatchewan. They have like these different ground shifting labels. But the way that he put the pier in and the way that he attached it to a giant boulder that was just fortuitously right in the middle of the hole that he bored into the side of the hill, it moved. Like it hasn't even moved like a fraction of a millimeter, considering we had all kinds of rain. The ground is now, it's been freezing and thawing. Different things have been happening. That pillar has not moved, even a noticeable, like we can't see it on like a level. Like when we put a level on, whether it's a phone or a bubble level or anything, it's still completely 100% level. So I have a lot of faith in him. I think that it probably is unlikely to move, or if it does, it's not going to move very much and probably will tend to move back. But that rock that we put it on, I don't think that rock is going anywhere. So I think we're going to be okay there.
Right on.
My concern is just the wood. There's a little bit of vibration when I give the pillar a good whack, and it's just a matter of whether or not that how much that's going to play into the vibration. I did see another individual who did this and was mounting really big scopes, And I'm mounting more in the range of medium-sized scopes. And I've seen people put medium-sized scopes on similar setups and they work. But I think we might be a little bit tall is the only thing, because we have 18 inches between the bottom of the observatory and where the pier comes through. So what we're planning to do, if there is too much vibration, I think there probably is to put steel angle iron around the wood. That's the plan anyway.
Okay. Well, I guess, as you continue the journey, you might run into some weird things that pop up that I guess you have to problem solve. Hopefully the vibration, is minimal once you get everything mounted up, and as long as you're not, boxing your pier, hopefully it's not too bad.
Well, yeah, that's right. Like I was showing Mike one day and he's like, yeah, but you'd never hit your pier. Like don't do that. That's not the test. Right.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is so I set up my wooden tripod and I gave it the same kind of hit. And I mean, the whole thing just moves like 2 or 3 inches, right? Like, sure, it doesn't really vibrate, but once you put a telescope on it and it has compression under weight, then it doesn't do that. So I'm kind of hoping that once we put the mount up there today and then give it a whack, I'm actually thinking once a 35-pound mount is sitting on top of the post, that it's going to provide that level of compression. But if it doesn't, I mean, there's a lot of different things we can do. And like originally I wanted a cement pillar. I wanted to do like cement blocks, I think, and I have the blocks. But my builder had some other ideas, and he made a good argument for this. People may be saying, well, why would you do a wooden post like that? And there's a really good reason to do this here, which might not be, in your location or somewhere else. But that is, Shane, and you're familiar with this, is that there's already about 6 or 8 giant wooden posts exactly like this in the hill that haven't moved in the past 8 years.
Oh, okay.
And so we know that that this type of post is and put in a certain way, and we talked to the people who did the other posts, and we put this one in the same way. So that's why we're fairly certain it's not going to move. That you dig until you hit a rock, you attach it to the rock, you make sure it's level, you fill it with 5 bags of cement, and skirt over the top with some soil, and that's not going to move. Then see what you got and then work around that, because that's what other people have done here, and it's worked beautifully as far as keeping a post straight. You put cement in, and one of the challenges with that is you've got a lot more weight all of a sudden, and we just don't know what a cement post is going to do on that hill because nobody's ever done it before, right? So we're trying to be consistent. All right. Alejandro wrote, hi, Chris and Shane. I hope all is well with you two. Alejandro here from South Florida. I always like getting the emails from Alejandro in South Florida. He emails us fairly frequently, and it's nice to see what it's like somewhere warm right now, Shane. So he goes on to say, I wanted to reach out and share a few recent images. So he sent us some photos of the moon and Saturn conjunction from back on Tuesday, October 24th. He says the moon was done with my phone, Saturn was done with a DSLR, and both images were made up in his 10-inch Dobsonian. Once the images were done, I made a composite in GIMP, which is my favorite tool of choice, which is the graphical image manipulating program, freeware. And he says, note, I just upgraded the secondary screws to the Bob's knobs on the scope, and now it's in great shape. Collimation is a breeze. Thanks, Alejandro. Thank you, Alejandro. Thanks for sending that.
Yeah, that was really good. Should I take the next one here from Simon?
Sure, yeah. Simon, yeah.
So, hi, Chris and Shane. I'm glad you got out recently to do some observing. It's a bit hit and miss here in the UK at the moment. We seem to be having storms rolling in every fortnight, and so clear nights are few and far between. Oh, anyway, one of my little projects this winter is to see if there is somewhere better to observe than my back garden on the outskirts of London. I've been looking at the numerous sky maps that are all slightly different and of various age, but I'm having difficulty reconciling the expected Bortle number with what I can actually see from the ground looking up. It occurred to me that local conditions like house lights, street lights, and humidity will affect the observer's perception of backscattered light, and this might be different to the upwards shining light from the Earth that is observed from space and used for some of the surveys. I think that's a really good comment there, Chris. I'm not sure what your thoughts are, but there's all kinds of data out there to tell you about dark sky sites. There's the light pollution maps, there's SQM ratings, and on and on and on. But until you just go and, see it with your own eyes at night, it's really hard to know for sure, because, the light pollution map may identify a location as, something favorable or dark, and you may go to that location and find out there's maybe a street light or a bright light to the south or to the east or somewhere where you may want to observe, which kind of spoils the location.
Yeah. It doesn't take much. This location I'm at right now is a good example of things working out for the better. I had observed near here a few times and noticed that it was particularly dark considering how close it was to the city, because there's not like street lights on all the secondary roads here. And that's where I'm at. And fortunately, my neighbors all either do enjoy stargazing or have enjoyed stargazing, and or like to sit out and look at the stars while they're having a campfire. So they don't have as many, or any lights they do have are fully shielded. So it works out pretty good here. Or they've been kind enough to either turn them off or point them away from me. So I should mention that as well. There was one light that was annoying this spring, and I kind of went over and said, hey, how's it going? And, oh, good. How are you? Good. I had this conversation. And I'm like, that light keeps coming on. Like, oh, we'll turn it off, right? It's all good. It's all good. So there's that as well, right? Because that light wasn't even that bright. It was like a 90-watt bulb or something like that. It was just in a really bad spot. Doesn't take much, right?
No, it doesn't. And sometimes it's as simple as having a conversation with somebody, as you did, and sometimes too you can even contact, say, the local municipality or whoever owns the street lights, and sometimes there's shielding options that are available too to control some of the light kind of overreach that might spoil an observing location. So there are options to sometimes improve local light pollution. But I'll go on here. Simon wrote a lot more. So he said, I decided to do my own survey of likely spots using my camera exposure from the ground, looking up and not bothering about luminance, illuminance, and Bortle numbers. I just need to know if Site A is better than Site B or my garden. It seemed to me that having driven the car for a while with headlights and looking up trying to make a subjective assessment might not be that reliable, hence the use of the camera. After some experimentation, I settled on a simple process that required me to set my camera on a tripod at chest, in brackets, observing height, pointing straight up with a 35mm lens. My camera is APS-C format, so that gives me about a 25 by 35 degree field of view. My other settings were ISO 800, f-stop of 2, and exposure of 30 seconds. As long as I kept all of the settings the same, I could compare the results directly by tiling them in a photo editor. I love that idea. So he says,
pretty cool.
Yeah, he attached a 3x3 picture showing the results so far. On the left column are the tiles from the garden. The lower left is at 2 a.m. after our street lights have been turned off from 1 a.m. till 5 a.m., which is pretty cool. The sky is significantly darker that the two tiles above that are earlier in the evening. The center column the center column 2 tiles are from a playing field site that is about 20 minutes away and is modestly better than the garden. The right column 2 tiles are from another site that is about 45 minutes away and significantly better than either. Although the practice is not so convenient to get to. This is still a work in progress, and although there are other factors to consider like travel convenience, parking, personal safety, and view of the horizon, it has been useful in assisting with some decisions about where and when to observe. I thought I would share this as a simple way of assessing real observed sky quality seen from the ground if anyone is looking for sites without having to scrutinize the maps or try to determine which stars they can or cannot see. Best regards, Simon. So I love that. I love this approach. And Chris, like, I remember multiple times you and I would do daytime trips to potential
Yeah.
observing sites just to see what it looked like in the daytime. You know, was there any, obstructions to our views? Were there any like significant safety issues, like a big hole in the ground that you may not see at night, and then we would often then return in the evening just to see, how dark it really was. And I think there were some sites that, with the pre-survey were maybe crossed off the list, while other sites, did turn into locations where we observed.
I too think Simon did a great job. And when I wrote him back, and I hope I didn't not offend him, but kind of, go in a wrong direction, is that I was so distracted by the fact that his street lights turn off in sort of at a reasonable time at 1 a.m. And I've gone ahead. Sorry, Shane, I forgot to put the image in the notes. I've dropped it in there now. I don't know if you have to refresh or anything. But in looking at the images, like he has images showing what it's like at home, another site, and then like this other site. But at his home with the lights off, that's kind of like the second darkest place. Now, all things being equal, is you choose the darkest place, but as you and I both know, Shane, not all things are equal. Personally, for me, I would almost just do what I can in the yard, and then for, if you're working on certain projects, is just try to like arrange your schedule and get up at night and just observe then. I mean, I find that easy to do. So that's sort of my opinion, just because the convenience of observing at home is just so much better. And that's, you're going to have like that's just the best time to observe anyway. And even though it might not be ideal for a whole host of reasons, you kind of live where you live and you have to work with what you got. And I think like if my lights turned off like that, wow, like my yard can actually be decently dark. When during the pandemic, for, great, chance luck, 3 of the streetlights directly behind my place burned out. One of them in the front of my place burned out, and then they were doing some work in the nearby buildings that do have some lights, and they were all off for 2020 and part of 2021 summers. And I was just like, this is like unbelievably fantastic. Literally, when I bought my dark sky site where my cabin is, the next week they went in and put the lights back in. So I really did a lot of observing in my yard during the pandemic, as you'll recall, and that's why.
Mm-hmm.
Even
and part of it too is you can even vary your observing lists. Like I have lists for my backyard, which is primarily double stars.
Yeah.
And then when I go to darker skies is when I look at other objects like O'Meara's hidden treasures list or whatever it might be. So that's another way to approach it too.
Yeah, I just was so distracted by, I think he did this great job, and I felt bad because I was so distracted by the fact that wherever he lives have a reasonably high level of intelligence, and they actually shut the lights off at night, which would make a whole heck of a lot of sense if more places did that. I haven't heard of that happening in as many places as not. So I was just so distracted by that. I apologize, Simon. And I would just be like, because your site is pretty close to that other site. So then, you can have a multi-prong approach, like Shane was saying, is have your sort of at home and away games. And then like, if there is something that you want to see that is in the morning or evening sky, do it that way. Like, but personally, like for me, I would be very inclined to think about like a small backyard observatory if you have the space, or a pier like Peter has that we chatted about before. Like that made me really excited for you observing at your home, because you could do a lot there. I think I would maximize that.
Yeah, for sure.
Gary wrote, and Gary is a Patreon supporter. He is the person that won a special prize recently, Shane.
Okay.
So he goes on to say, this is great. It's really nice. I got to say, whenever people do get a prize, whether we've given the Patreon supporters or not, people often do write us, and it's really cool to kind of hear like what happens. So Gary goes on to write, "Hello, Chris. I wanted to thank you both for Alistair Ling's monocular telescope. I left for the East Coast in early October, and it was not here, but was delivered when I got home in late October. It's fun and very transportable. It's a fun and very transportable piece of gear. I know most people send you photos of the sky, but here's one that's from another universe. It is a shot from the rooftop gardens of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City and looks down over Central Park. That image is spectacular. You can see like the tree. It's just a shot. It looks like New York is in a sea of trees, like how sometimes you see like a sea of clouds because they're all sort of different varying heights. I've never seen a shot of New York like that before. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, very cool.
What's otherworldly about the shot is there was a proliferation of pencil thin high rises in New York City for those ultra rich, and then of these of the three high rises close by, you can purchase a full floor for $66 million US, and maybe some of those people could be Patreon supporters, he suggests. That'd be great. He goes on to say, I'll include a couple more shots. So he included this beautiful shot of M31. That was spectacular. And then he included a picture of his equipment. He goes on to say, I decided to learn about astrophotography about a year ago, and this is the first decent photo I have produced. Yeah, it's a very decent photo. I started with a mirrorless camera, lens, and star tracker. And before then, I was taking wide field Milky Way photographs. It took a full year to learn how to program and operate the rig. In the second photo, I built it over time so I could learn each component before moving on to the next. That's pretty smart, I think.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
I think that's a pretty smart approach, sort of the part whole approach philosophy.
Yeah. It's a really good way to kind of ramp up.
I think if I just bought the whole system, I would have gotten frustrated and given up. I do hear that from time to time. I think that you've hit on something here, Gary, and that is that, and we see that as well, Shane, sometimes because, when I started, I feel like I was fortunate now in retrospect that I just didn't have any money when I started astronomy. And so I could only get, somebody gave me a book and then I could, and binoculars, and then I could only buy like one thing every year, maybe like a tripod to stabilize them, and another book and red flashlight, and finally charts, and then save up for a year or two and really learn the sky while I saved up, and then buy a telescope. And I sort of ended up doing something similar in my astronomy journey. And we always want to have that instant gratification, I suppose, or many people do. I guess I don't, but yeah, I think that's pretty good. He goes on to say, baby steps. I also think I really understood the final cost of the rig. I would have had a second thought about it too. Hope this was entertaining. Thank you again for the scope. I will also send Alistair a note via snail mail. Enjoy your podcast very much. Best, Gary. Thanks so much, Gary. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Do appreciate it, and really appreciate all of the emails that we get. It's always fun to read them. Anything
to add to this episode, Shane?
No, that is all, Chris.
I really enjoy getting the emails from people. I felt bad for some reason. People send us these really beautiful long emails, and I sit down and I read them, and then sometimes something comes up. Like I was telling you, Shane, before we started this recording, one of my coworkers who typically does on call is in Nepal, and visiting with his family. And so I'm doing some of the on-call while he's in Nepal. And because of that, like right now, like even while we're doing the podcast, I'm on call here and have been doing some other duties at work. And I think I'm just like a little bit distracted for some reason. I keep reading these emails and then not replying. So I keep writing, I'm sorry, I did read your email like a week ago, but now I'm replying. So my apologies if you sent an email and we were slow at replying. Concluding message. Just a reminder for our Patreon calendar draw. All you need to do is become a Patreon supporter to be placed in our draw. Thanks to everybody for listening and sending in your emails. We do enjoy reading them. We also enjoy receiving your show ideas, observations, and questions at actualastronomy@gmail.com.
Thank you everyone for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the show. If you are interested in more information, would like to contact us, or if you would like to support the podcast, check out our website, actualastronomy.com.